Game theory optimal, or GTO, is one of the most misunderstood ideas in poker. Not because it is wrong, but because players expect it to do something it was never designed to do. They expect it to tell them how to play every hand against every opponent in every situation. It cannot do that, and when players try to use it that way, GTO stops helping and starts hurting. GTO is not a strategy, it is a baseline. It describes how two perfectly balanced players would perform against each other if neither could be exploited. That is all it represents. There are no tendencies, no mistakes, and no psychology. There is only equilibrium. Poker, however, is not played at equilibrium. It is played against humans. Players who overfold, underbluff, size poorly, and misunderstand pressure. When those deviations exist, pure GTO stops being optimal because exploitation becomes available. This is where confusion begins. Players study solver outputs and mistake them for commands. They see mixed frequencies and assume uncertainty is required. They see low-frequency calls and think courage is being tested. It is not. The solver is not asking for bravery, it is describing balance. GTO does not care whether a call wins. It does not care whether it feels uncomfortable. It does not care if an opponent never bluffs because the solver assumes they do. That assumption is everything. Once that assumption breaks, the output loses authority. If your opponent underbluffs, the correct response is not balance. It is folding, even if GTO shows a call. The solver's logic was built on a bluff frequency that does not exist in reality. This is where players feel conflicted. They say they know a spot is a fold exploitatively, but GTO says they have to call. That is not what GTO is saying. GTO is saying that if the opponent were balanced, this call would be necessary. That is conditional logic, not instruction. GTO is a map of neutral territory. It shows what happens when neither player gives anything away. Poker is about finding where territory is already exposed. You do not fight fair when your opponent is not. This does not mean GTO is useless. It means GTO has a specific job. It teaches structure. It shows how ranges interact, which hands perform well, and where pressure points exist. It teaches what should happen before human behavior distorts it. Strong players use GTO to understand the battlefield. Then they look at the opponent in front of them and decide whether that battlefield applies. Sometimes it does. Often, it does not. This is why blindly copying solver lines produces strange results. The line is not wrong. The opponent is different. You are playing equilibrium poker against someone who is not participating in equilibrium. That is not discipline, that is misalignment. GTO fails without context because context defines incentives. Stack depth, position, player pool, history, and psychology all matter. Remove those factors and the model becomes theory, accurate, but irrelevant. This is also why great players can appear unbalanced. They fold too much against tight players. They bluff more against calling stations. They deviate constantly, not randomly, but intentionally. Balance is only required when exploitation is unavailable. GTO is not meant to be followed. It is meant to be understood. Once it is understood, it gives you permission to deviate correctly, not emotionally, but strategically. If you treat GTO as law, you will feel confused. If you treat it as a language, you gain clarity. It explains why lines exist, so you know when they no longer should. The strongest players in the world are not the most balanced. They are the most adaptive. They know what equilibrium looks like and exactly when to abandon it. GTO does not fail because it is wrong. It fails because it is incomplete without context, and poker is nothing but context. I am Alex Mercer, and that's the spot.